Hello, Mutts. I'm Devin Shepard.
And I'm David B. Jacobs.
And we are the Cadaver Dogs. And today we are joined again by friend of the pod, Austin Torres, host of the Would You Die podcast and filmmaker in his own right. You can catch his latest short film, Spider, playing this month at the following film festivals. It is on a worldwide tour: Royal Star, Kansas City, Hell's Half Mile, and Festival of Darkness. Welcome back, Austin.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for taking the time to see where Spider is infesting festivals nationwide.
I'm so excited for this one. Obviously, we had you on where you talked about your previous film, Ice Cream, and then remind me the name of the other film that you were talking about as well at that point.
So that would be my first short film, Best Day Ever. And then Spider
Yes.
is my third one. Is a fourth on the way? Maybe.
Oh. Can you tell us a little bit about Spider? I know we touched on it when you were here on the mini-sode. You had a really cool inspiration for this film, which I do want to talk about a little bit.
Okay, so Spider is basically my love letter to creature features. As someone who is arachnophobic, it was something that I really wanted to conquer my fears. There's a lot of inspirations. I think the main ones are Alien, The Evil Dead, and Jurassic Park.
Yes, the
Nice.
classics. And obviously, knowing you, Jurassic Park had to be in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, this is very Jurassic Park coded. And a lot of creature features, especially from the 90s, I really think influences like Anaconda and Deep Blue Sea and Lake Placid. Arachnophobia,
Yes.
obviously.
Obviously. Well, we're so excited to have you back today. I feel like every time I say we're so excited to have you back and then get into the films we're talking about, I'm like, hard left turn into like a dark, heavy subject that we're covering today. So we're going to take it down a notch. But I actually have a little announcement for you guys. So, as you saw with our latest episodes with Chloe, we did something different. We split it into two parts where we cover one movie in one part and the second movie in the second part. We are trying that again. So, this is a little experiment. For this episode, we are only going to be covering one movie. And at the end of the episode, we will have our bone reviews for that one film. And then in our next episode, we will be covering the second movie. And then we will have our comparison section in that second episode. And then you'll also get the bone reviews for that specific movie. You don't have to listen to both, though we highly recommend it, as it makes the comparison section that much more fun and you get the full analysis of the themes that we are covering. But we are interested in what you all think about this new structure. Is it working for you? Do you prefer this way? Do you prefer the older way? Do you want just one episode or do you like having a couple of choices? Hit us up at cadaverdogspodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram or Twitter at cadaverdogspod. Let us know what you think. With that, David, throw us to the movie.
Lisa Reisert is a people pleaser. A successful hotel manager on her way home from her grandmother's funeral, she's amazing at her job, always bending over backwards to help even the most irate of customers. She's impeccably dressed, constantly working, loves sea breeze, has no time for herself, shrugs off her father on the phone, and is eternally alone. But all this might just change when she meets a handsome young man at the airport. With his stunning blue eyes, Jackson Ripner, his parents are assholes, invites Lisa to bond over drinks while they await their delayed flight. And for once in her life, Lisa accepts. They even find themselves seated next to each other on the red-eye plane. But is this fate weaving its threads, or is Jack Ripner pulling some strings to be near her? Is he interested, or does he only want her to move her high-profile government client into an ocean-facing room for an assassination attempt? Is Jack Ripner even his real name, or an alias that no one will question when he presents Lisa with a JR inscribed wallet belonging to her father Joe, who will be killed if Lisa does not comply? Well, in case this is your first episode of Cadaver Dogs, this is a horror podcast, so as much as I'd love to watch that sweet little Hallmarky rom-com, Lisa, her father, her client Keith, Keith's family, and everyone on this plane are in danger. For the rest of this flight, Jack will do everything to assert his power over her to get her to make that phone call. A call only Lisa in her unique position can make without raising alarms. At the same time, Lisa takes every opportunity to outwit Jack, passing notes to strangers, writing messages with soap on the bathroom mirror, even faking a phone call when the service goes down. But ultimately, she's left with no choice and makes the call. but she has a plan. As they land, she stabs a pen into Jack's trachea, preventing him from calling his hitman, and makes a dash down the aisle. She rushes to her father's house and calls her staff member Cynthia to get Keith and his family out of that room and evacuate the building. Arriving at her childhood home, she rams the hitman down with her car, but Jack is right behind her, and they play a game of cat and mouse through the buildings until Joe, Lisa's father himself, swoops in for the kill shot. This is Red Eye, starring Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy, directed by Wes Craven from a script by Carl Ellsworth.
You did your summary a little bit like the first trailer that came out for this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of you remember this, but the trailer that came out for this movie was such a teaser because it made it seem like a rom-com.
It's not?
Were you even listening, Austin?
I got lost in Cillian Murphy's eyes.
That's fair. That's,
As one does, as one
yes,
does.
as one does. But also I feel like the first half of the movie kind of does lean into that. Like real like tension and horror doesn't happen for a good way through the film. So my first question to you guys is why you think they decided to play this off as a romantic movie for the first part of the film, or like do you think it was effective?
I think it was incredibly effective, and this is just speculation, but I think Wes Craven, especially post Scream, post like the third time he reinvented the horror genre, he was very intellectual, and at least to me seems like a filmmaker that was always trying to do something new, trying to challenge himself both craft wise and intellectually. I think he knew what he was doing is the short way, the non-rambling answer. He knew he would never be able to do a rom-com, so this would be his chance to escape horror for a little bit, and then when he brings us back into the horror, it hits even harder.
Yeah, it's like shocking to the
He
audience.
actually did not identify the movie as a horror himself. He called it a thriller and made a big thing of like, yeah, I'm moving out of the horror genre. But then me and Devin come in and we like keep arguing about how thrillers are actually a subset of horror movies. So sorry, Wes.
I put this on and I was watching it and Will, my boyfriend, comes into the room and he's like, "What? Why are you watching this?" I was like, "Oh, it's for the podcast." He's like, "But this isn't a horror movie." I was like, "Excuse me." I agree with Austin, first of all. I think, like, obviously, yeah, Wes is entering a new world here, and he does experiment and play, which is fun. But with our overall theme of today, if you didn't know, we're talking about the anxiety of America in post 9/11.
Yeah.
And so I think this is actually very reflective of the time because what was 9/11 to most Americans? It was like a big wake-up call. Our country actually is, able to be attacked. We aren't the most powerful country in the world. Like people can get through our defenses. And I think that we were living in this false sense of security for a really long time. And I think presenting the film as this romance movie for the first I don't know how many minutes, but a good portion of the film kind of sets us in that tone of like security and happiness. And then when we do get that flip and we enter into the thriller horror, it really is like that shocking moment, just like 9/11 did to most of America. So I feel like it really is that like that turn that is reflective on society at the time.
Even when you look at 9/11 itself, there was like this idea in America, we just feel so safe while we fought in like World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. All of those were overseas. It never really came to hit us at home.
Right.
So giving us that false sense of security and then throwing it out the window really was like what was going on at the time, that there was just this fear of what if the war could actually come to us.
Yeah, because this is the first attack on American soil since the Civil War? No.
Pearl Harbor, but that was a military base.
Yes. Right, right, right. Okay, let's talk about Cillian Murphy
Okay.
because, like, if we are going off of this false romantic sense in the beginning of the film, we have to like kind of be attracted to him. And as Austin has put it, he does have dreamy eyes. So we, as an audience, like kind of are rooting for this relationship to happen, right? That's the false romance that's happening here. But he is ultimately the bad guy. So, what are your thoughts about casting Cillian Murphy in this role of bad guy? Like, what was Wes trying to say with this casting choice?
Well, it's less on the nose than casting a Muslim person or someone who uh would be brown or something like that, where which would have been more obviously this is 9/11, but also it's kind of a big problem of this time period that a lot of movies were and TV shows were doing that, and it created a lot of Islamophobia, and that wasn't good. So I'm glad that West didn't lean into that part and just like went for the terror attack without getting into the racism of it.
Yeah, totally. Austin, what were your thoughts of Dreamy Killian?
I'm sorry, I got lost again. No, I'm kidding. This is my reading. It's not through the context of 9/11. It's more through the context of romantic comedies. But
Mhm.
I think casting someone like Cillian Murphy, where he's very attractive, very charming, and he can play charming. When you watch a romantic comedy, even though the characters a lot of times are assholes, you still want them to get together. I'm not saying these characters are assholes, but I'm gonna reference the movie Anyone But You, a film I have
Mm.
not seen. So I don't know
Neither
anything
have I.
about the characters, but I know Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Cowell are two of the most beautiful people on planet Earth right now.
Hell yes.
And just from seeing the poster, I'm like, I want them together. Maybe have a few hearty
Yeah.
chuckles, but I want them together. And seeing Killian Murphy and Rachel McAdams, it's like there is something about seeing hot people fall in love that I think we as cinephiles enjoy. That's the whole purpose of the romantic comedy genre.
Yeah. No, and you make the point, like, we went right to Killian, but, like, obviously, Rachel McAdams during this time, huge rom-com star,
Yeah.
is coming off a lot of, like, romance and comedy movies. Here she is, just like Wes, doing something new.
Yeah, this is before she exclusively dated time travelers. Uh,
And Doctor Strange.
Time traveler.
Oh, that's true. You're right. You're right. I forgot. Oh my goodness. I think playing with that cinematic language of the romantic comedy and having these two very attractive people that you want to see fall in love to have them fight instead. Well, honestly, still think we still kind of want to see that too. Like either way, they're fighting or they're falling in love.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sets up the character arc that we're used to in romantic comedies,
Yeah.
where like she is always working, she has no time for love, and it kind of reorders how that needs to go. And we expect it to be from the romantic comedy genre tropes, we expect it to go that she needs to meet this man who will teach her the importance of family and going home for Christmas, and then it twists that and it shows us that actually no, a man will not solve all your problems, and this change needs to come from yourself. It's not a problem with her being closed off necessarily. It's more just a problem of her being afraid, and she needs to confront her fears and re-seize control.
Which she does, but
She
not
does.
through the romance. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I did wanna talk about what I thought the casting choice was. It is this handsome white dude that we're seeing who is the bad guy, and it feels very much like classic Wes Craven, call is coming from inside the house situation, where, like, it's coming from literally the seat next to her. It's coming from the guy that was literally flirting with her and buying her a drink at the bar. Like, it's coming from your neighbor. And I feel like that also was, like, very reflective of the time, and Cillian Murphy seems very much like random hot guy you meet at the airport, and that's how he's presented. And it kind of presents this idea of the person that's going to kill you, your father, or the head of Homeland Security, literally could be the one sitting next to you, which is essentially what happened when the terrorist attacks happened.
Yeah.
And I think that you kinda say something really interesting because now I'm kinda thinking about a lot of the villains in Wes Craven's filmography and earlier stuff like The Hills Have Eyes and A Nightmare on Elm Street. His villains are hideous. They are scary looking. Freddy Krueger's quite literally disfigured.
Mhm.
The in The Hills Have Eyes, they're like the other. But like a lot of these villainous characters are very much aesthetically the other. But then like starting with Scream, it's heartthrob Billy Loomis. And
Yeah.
now it's like
Yeah.
even heartthrobbier Killian Murphy, who's a gentleman who like kind of puts a one pouty dude in his place in line at the airport.
But Murphy does become disfigured by the end of the movie with the stab in
Mm.
his
Right.
throat, and then it distorts his voice. So he's talking like this
Oh,
for
you
the
mean like
rest of the
Ghostface?
movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about this, and I'm like, obviously, Wes Craven is very much known for his final girls throughout his movies, Nancy, Sydney, etc. And Lisa, in her own right, is a final girl. So, how do you feel like Lisa fits into the mold of the final girl? And do you see any differences between the final girls, as you were hinting on, Austin, the final girls before 9/11 versus after 9/11?
Well, I wouldn't call Lisa a final girl necessarily.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because for me, Final Girl is a trope of slasher movies or slasher adjacent movies, and while this is
Hmm.
a horror film, it's not slasher. There is like no kill count. Only bad guy and other bad guy are actually killed. So like what's there to be final of? I think of her more as a hero. She's our protagonist. She's our hero, but I wouldn't necessarily classify her as a final girl. But I still think that we're playing off gender dynamics very, 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 very heavily.
Yeah.
I think she kinda reminds me less of a Nancy Thompson, more of a Clary Starling,
Mhm.
Mm,
where
yeah,
she's doing her job.
yeah.
No, I definitely agree with the both of you. I mean, if Wes Craven doesn't consider this a horror film, so he probably doesn't want her to be a final girl. The part so we were talking a little bit about, I mean, in our last series, we covered rape revenge films, covered a lot of, Carol J. Clover's book, which coined Final Girl, and she talks a lot about, how when the final girl finally gets to the end, she has done all this work, she has survived and is saved by a man, that being the police, the army, someone coming in and doing the final thing to defeat the monster, and that's what I saw in this movie.
That definitely happens in this movie.
I hate it so much because, like, in Scream, at least Sydney gets the last kill shot,
Mhm.
um, when her father comes out, but here the father comes out in the same way that Sydney's dad like, the whole I don't know about you guys, but there was the whole cat and mouse in the house in the end. I was like, "This is fucking Scream." Um, he comes out
Yeah.
at the end and ends up defeating Jack himself, after fucking Lisa does all this work.
I
So
feel like it would have been fine if like he had like hit Jack with something to just to get Jack off of her and then she grabbed the gun and shot him.
right? But why do you think it was important, though, to the story, besides his lovable dad character, to have him do the final shot and not Lisa? Or not important to the story, but what do you think they're trying to say with that specifically?
I think it ties into the we're all stepping up, we're all going to be heroes. Devin, you linked this interview where I don't have the exact quote that Wes Craven said, but he basically talked about how like, oh, in this time period right now, where we're all fighting the war, we're all participating and doing our part, and he found that interesting and wanted to comment on it. And I think that's what you get from having the dad also join in the fight at the end. That this is his fight too. You have the little girl trips Cillian Murphy in the aisle, so
Mhm.
it's her fight too. If you see something, say something.
Which is exactly stemming out of this time. That's where that quote comes from, right? Yeah, I like it. I still have an issue with the gender dynamics, and David, you were steering us towards the gender dynamics because they are commented on in this movie.
Definitely. I mean, early on when Lisa isn't immediately ready to do the deed, Jack comments that she's using her female-driven emotion-based dilemma is how he describes it. And then later in the cat and mouse bit at the end, Lisa retorts, "Well, where's your male-driven fact-based logic now, Jack?" So there,
So
it's
good.
part of the text is this tropes about gender and oh, women are so emotional and they can't be reasonable, and it's kind of taking that and like throwing it for a loop and just saying I gotta know this is complete bullshit. Don't believe those tropes. Those are wrong. Even in the rom-com section there's kind of this aspect of men always telling Lisa what to do and how to think and asking like, "Oh, are you sure? Are you okay?" And she's like, "Why are
Yeah.
you doubting me?" And she talks about her father doing that and she talks about Jack doing that.
That's such a relatable moment because I feel like that happens all the time. I don't know if this happens, like, out for everybody, but I feel like definitely in the women's world, people are like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you're okay?" Like, "Yes, can you please trust that I understand myself and my emotions and my all of that?"
When they're at the airport bar, doesn't he try to, like, guess her drink?
Yep.
and he gets it wrong, and he's like, "Are you sure?"
He gets it right, but she
Oh, he
lies
gets it right.
and
Oh, that's right.
Let's talk about that moment too, because yeah, that was an interesting reveal. He was right that all she orders is I think she orders sea breezes as her normal drink, and
Yes.
then she lies and says, "It's a bay breeze, actually." Why have this moment in the film? I feel like I have answers, but I wanna throw it to you guys first.
Well, it's interesting when it's revealed that she lied. When he confronts her about it later in the bathroom, he's like extremely aggressive and extremely violent. And he's like, "You have only ordered sea breezes for fucking ever, and now you order a fucking bay breeze. Don't you fucking lie to me." Like he flips out. This like actually fucks with him that she ordered a different drink. He's like so mad that she took that power away from him to
Mm.
have stalked her and learned what her drink order is.
You're right, it is a sneaky way of her to, like, get some power over him.
Really hurts his ego because he's
Yeah.
a very vain person and he holds himself a certain way. And I know he's like acting the whole time in the movie too, but I do think that there's a truth to his character in which I don't think he's a perfectionist, but I think he kind of prides himself in those kind of details, kind of like
Yeah.
Patrick Bateman, where one tiny thing will set him off.
I agree. His ego is a little hurt, but I think it's also the fact that she lied in the first place because his response is also, "I never lied to you, Lise," which David we can argue about, but I would think that that is actually true and that his name actually might be Jackson Ripner. Um,
No, I don't think
he
so.
he really takes pride in saying, "I never lied to you."
Yeah, but I think he's lying.
Well, that's interesting. We do live in a post 9/11 world. Wes is definitely playing around with trust here, and the theme of trust. How much do we trust another person, especially strangers? Like, how much should we trust another person? That plays in a little bit into what we were saying earlier, right? About like the shoe bomber could be the guy sitting next to you on the airplane.
He could even be white.
He could even be white. But I think it's also, like, possibly commenting on the effects of the government at the time. We're seeing a lot of interesting swings in America's trust in the government and faith in the government around this time. This is, again, to remind everyone, 2005?
Yep,
Yeah.
2005.
So
Yeah.
this is right after Bush is elected into the White House, right? That was 2004?
That was 2000.
That was 2000. So it's his
Yeah, this
second term
would
in the
this would
White
be
House.
the
Yeah.
start of his second term.
Yeah.
They filmed it and got it out pretty fast, so I don't know when exactly they shot it. Maybe he was reelected during the shoot or something. I don't know. I didn't look up when
Yeah.
they shot it.
I mean, thinking about it, 2004 reelection, they're definitely going off of a platform of he did America proud during the 9/11 response, right? That's basically how he won his second election. So we're talking about this stuff a lot at the time that
Yeah.
this movie comes out.
I mean, it was also because the Democratic candidate Kerry was just not well liked either. That was the year where we got the turd sandwich versus giant douche comparison from South Park. I think that episode came out that year,
Ah,
which was, that bit of both sides suck. So you're voting for not Kerry or not Bush. And then a lot of those ideas kind of persisted all the way into more modern years when it is very much not the case. Nope.
but that's exactly it, right? That's a great pop culture reference pull to show exactly how the nation was thinking at the time was we don't really like who's leading our country right now. We don't really trust them.
It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. You just mentioned, Devin, how we had just covered the rape revenge movies with I Spit on Your Grave and Revenge. But this movie actually kind of has a similar vibe for a moment. This scene was actually written the morning that they shot it. But very briefly, Rachel McAdams, as the plane lands, mentions that she had been sexually assaulted several years earlier, and then she goes like, "Oh, what I thought after that happened?" And Cillian Murphy dismissed her and goes like, "Oh, that it wasn't your fault." And she goes, "No, that it will never happen again." And then she stabs him and runs off, which is
Love that
super
moment.
good for you, Rachel McAdams. Like they literally added that the day of. It's not relevant at all to the rest of the movie. If you took that out, everything would still make sense. Why do you think it's there?
I do think it's a big crowd pleaser moment. Like, so I watched this very recently with my mom and my grandma, and that
Oh,
moment happened, and they hadn't seen it, I don't think, and they were like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Yeah." I remember distinctly that was a very "get 'em" type moment.
it does really help her arc. Like, I agree with you. Her fight back gets earned because you present her as a damaged woman. You know, that scar is very. I think that image works so well. And so I agree with everything that you're saying, Austin. And then, of course, I'm going to come in with the 9/11 read, which, if we look at Lisa as a reflection of America, right? She is the person that we want to be rooting for during this time. She is hurt. She is damaged. She has been assaulted, very much like America during that time. We are
Oh.
attacked. Specifically, sexual assault is, of course, it is overused as the backstory that hurts all women and the thing that they have to overpower. More things happen to women than sexual assault. But that aside, I think it works here because it does very much reflect exactly what happened to America. If you're looking at American soil as a woman's body, as our own body, it was attacked. So I think that metaphor does work.
Yeah, I agree. That is my read as well. She says it was a few years ago. What else happened a few years ago?
Mm.
2001, September 11th on 2001. And now she's saying it will never happen again. That I don't know if that's an exact motto of that time period, but like it pretty much is. Like that's pretty much the idea is we're not going to let this happen again. We're going to stop all these terrorist attacks now. We're going to have all our guards up. We're going to increase our security. We are going to prevent this from ever happening again.
I love Wes Craven because all of that went over my head until you guys just pointed it out to me.
I think her entire character arc, like, just works as a metaphor for America. Even aside from that, like, her response to it, that she's shutting down, that she is engrossed in her work. We are a very work-heavy nation. That she, isn't having time for her friends or family, that she's very closed off and kind of afraid to associate with others, and
But with that, David, they make it a big point that she's a people pleaser. Do you think that's reflective on America at all?
I think you can read America that way. I don't agree with reading America that way, but I think that is a way to read America. That is a narrative that can happen. That America is always trying to make everything better. We're going all around the world. We're going to all these smaller nations. We're helping them with all their dictator problems. We're trying to do good out there.
That's a view. We're trying to help other nations and dictatorships, as in we're
No,
overthrowing
to prevent
governments and
dictatorships.
prevent yeah, but we're also, overthrowing governments and, leadership
Shh, don't
assassinations?
tell them that part. Even, like, the fact that her client is the government guy, he's what is he? Department of Homeland Security, something like
Yeah.
that? But he talks about, like, how he is, I think, arranging peace talks with, like, some nations that aren't specified, and this man is not only her client, he is her friend. She knows him. They are on a first name basis. When he is told Lisa Reiser approved of this change, he goes, "Nope, that's fine. I trust her." Trust again. She trusts him. She talks about like how he's a very nice man. She likes his family. Like they know each other. They are friends. And it's almost like saying like, "Oh, the government over there, those government guys, that's your friend."
Would that be a comment of, like, maybe where Bush had, like, that famous, "You're either with us, you're against us"?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. It was very much like, we have fucking Guantanamo Bay is going on at this time. We're like torturing all these people. And it's like, oh, you don't approve of torture? You're not American then. Like this is you should be fine with all the torture and all that.
I mean, that was the Iraq War, right? Like, that was the big thing where they're capturing suspected terrorists and torturing them, waterboarding them. Remember how big waterboarding discussions were? I was 12. And,
Yeah.
like, I'm like,
They buried people alive with cockroaches.
they blasted Corn at them, Corn the band. But all of this stuff, right? All this torture stuff, the government was hiding it from people. I forget what papers they were, but there's that whole movie with Adam Driver about it that's on
Yeah.
Amazon.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really good and you should watch it.
The report.
Thank you.
The whole idea of all of this, though, is that like Cillian Murphy is an American who is working against the American government, therefore he is an enemy, and it's
Yeah.
the if you're not with us, you're against us. Like they called it the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Like this was it wasn't even controversial in the Congress. Congress overwhelmingly passed it. It was like near unanimous that everyone approved the Patriot Act. And then as it started rolling out and people started seeing what was happening from it, everyone's like, wait, this is like fucked up though. What about our privacy? And anytime you ask about privacy, it's like, well, what about security? It's called the Patriot Act. Are you not a fucking patriot?
Because the Patriot Act did allow a lot of people to, if you're a suspected terrorist, it allowed them access, the government access to a lot of things that should be private. They could tap your phones now, and it did feel like people were starting to abuse that a little bit. But also, let's talk a little bit about what else changed during this time. Airport security and how people flew planes. It's talked on a little bit about this movie. I mean, the entire movie takes place in an airport and on a plane. So I wanted to bring it up about if you had any thoughts about what this film was saying about the anxiety or the fear of flying at the time, if you saw any of that in the film.
I remember being at the airport being like 4 and 5 pre 9/11, and it being vastly different from what airport security is now. Like, you can't smoke in the airport anymore, and a lot of other things you can't do. But I think Red Eye comes out in a time where all these changes are so new,
Yeah.
and I think Red Eye might be one of the first films to kind of highlight anxieties on a plane in film.
There's also snakes on a plane, which is what we'll be covering next to pair with Red Eye. We're talking about snakes on a plane.
Oh, we should have done that.
I only just thought of that.
No, no, good. Yeah, you're right, but, like, it's interesting that they didn't choose a terrorist plot too. I mean, it is a terrorist plot, but, like, in a different way. Like, he's not attacking the plane, he's not attacking the airport, he's attacking a single person in a hotel. But we do see that the plane in this sense is almost a safe haven. Like, it is hell, but it's also a safe haven. Like, as long as she is in the air and can delay this attack.
Because of all these changes, there is sort of a safety in the airport and in the airplane that would not have been present a few years prior if this had come
Yeah,
earlier. But it also heightens his threat because, oh, he got all this past security, even with all these measures he got through. But Lisa is now our line of defense, and we're seeing these lines of defense pull through. There's a little girl who sees something and says something, although they don't believe her because they just think that people are hooking up in there in the bathroom. But then the little girl comes back to help later by tripping Cillian Murphy down the aisle, and it's weird in the movie that people on this plane seem a lot more interested in talking to strangers than has
mhm,
ever been the experience in my life. Anytime I've been on a plane, I do not regularly talk to random people on the plane. I do not get out of my aisle and walk up to someone I met an hour ago in line and start talking to them. But it kind of explains that there's like a sense of camaraderie now that like all these people on this plane are sort of connected more through this joint experience of like we're
yeah.
gonna make it through this. You also, I mean, you have the kids even talking about like, oh, we're not gonna make it, we're not gonna make it, and like doing a Final Destination thing.
It's like that scene in Spider-Man where the Green Goblin is, like, throwing bombs at Spider-Man on the bridge, and New York is on the bridge, and they're like, "You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us," and they
Oh
throw
yeah,
shit at the Green Goblin, which
which was a
that's
reshoot.
post 9/11, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
they reshot that and added that scene post 9/11.
People coming together, camaraderie. Yes, this film very much shows it. I feel like the other thing this film shows is that anyone can be a hero because of that little girl. I think the flight attendants, do eventually catch on.
They're trying to help Cillian Murphy, but they kind of incidentally hold him up, which is still helpful.
Yeah, they're regardless, they're very much characters in the film. They have a lot
Yes.
going on, they have a lot to do, and I think it's very important that we show flight crews, during this time because we have to mention United 93. I mean, this was something that happened at 9/11. David, can you give us a little background there just to add some color?
I read that whole Wikipedia page yesterday, and I was fucking crying reading this wiki page. On 9/11, there were 4 planes. 2 for the World Trade Centers, 1 for the Pentagon, and the last one was United 93. We don't actually know what its target was. It was either the White House or the Capitol building, but it left a bit later than the others. Took a little bit longer for the hijackers to take over. So the passengers and crew knew what was happening. They pieced together what was happening as the news was coming in, and they plotted basically to take down the hijackers, and the plane wound up crashing in a field, and everyone on board perished. But the terrorists were not successful in launching their attack because the passengers and crew came together and worked to overthrow this. There is a lot that we don't know. The plane was fucking eviscerated, so there isn't a lot of physical evidence of what happened. All we have is like phone calls that they were all making to their family members. We have records of radio things and whatnot. At one point, the terrorists, we think they accidentally called the flight control when they meant to talk to the passengers. So they told the passengers that they were going to be landing at an airport and they had their demands. So they made it sound like it was just a kidnapping thing, but the passengers knew what was going on. And those phone calls are hard to we don't
You
have the
listen to them?
we don't have the audio of them. We have the transcripts of them. The audio itself has not been made public at the request of the family,
Yeah, thank God. Oh my
but a
God.
lot of that is present there. And you even hear them like occasionally talking to someone else in the plane. So there was one guy where the last words that we hear from him is he turns away from the phone. He says, "All right, let's do this. Let's roll." And that like became a rallying cry throughout the 2000s. That was the rallying cry for the Iraq War. It wound up becoming, and was a quote that George Bush would repeat over and over again: "Is let's roll." We don't know if they breached a cockpit or not. If we don't know who died before the plane crashed and who died in the crash. Like we don't have that evidence. But whatever happened, they succeeded in preventing the attack.
Ugh, that's so heartbreaking. With that, I mean, obviously, Wes is showing kind of honoring that to the flight crews
Yeah.
and to the people on the plane, and anyone can be a hero.
And it's not even just the people on the plane, because it's also Cynthia who works at the hotel. I don't know what her exact
Yeah.
position title would be, but she's at the front desk and is kind of filling in for Lisa while Lisa's away for a couple of days. And is young and new. She's like still training, is the impression that we get. So she calls Lisa with a lot of issues and whatnot of like, how do I deal with these customers right now? And Lisa does stick up for her, even when criticizing, like, "Oh, don't tell the customers to calm down. That won't help." But she still sticks up for Cynthia. And even at the end of the movie, those same irate customers are like, "Ah, we got evacuated. There's a hole in the building. We want you to fire this person who just saved all these lives." And Lisa's like, "You can fill out a comment card and then you can shove it up your ass."
Yes.
And it's just like, great.
But yeah, it's very much being like, "Hey, these people with thankless jobs, like, they save your life. They are the heroes."
And especially when you're ignorant to what's going on behind the scenes, like, there was a whole ass terrorist attack, and your first thought is, "We got evacuated? What the hell?"
Okay, were there any final comments?
I just wanna shout out one more time Cillian Murphy's dreamy eyes before we actually move on.
I think that is a good place to end. Well, as I said at the beginning, we're doing things a little bit differently. So we're not going to our second film. So, David, this is the part where you say,
All right, now it is time for Rob's favorite part of the show, the bone review section, where we rate just this one movie on a scale of 1 to 4 bones. Starting us off is Devin Shepard. What did you think of Red Eye?
I love this movie, but it was definitely a favorite when I came out. It does read a little more TV movie now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But and I was thinking about this, and it's probably because like most thrillers like this now only exist on TV. So it just kind of has that TV vibe. This isn't something that you see in the theaters anymore. But I do really like it. I think the script is brilliantly tension filled. I found myself holding my breath like a good chunk of the way through the movie. I think the pacing is really great. I think like it is the definition of a thriller, even though it's a subset of horror. Lisa is yet again another beloved Wes Craven female figure. I love her, but I also like am obsessed with Rachel McAdams. So whatever she plays, I will fall in love with. Killian's Eyes, putting that in there. Everything's formulaic, but it also works. And like upon doing more research, and of course, like upon learning everything that Wes Craven says about this movie, and he puts so much love into his work, and so much like there's so much reasoning behind everything that he does, and I love it even more. Yeah, I think it's a really good reflection of America at the time, and for that, I will give this movie 3 bones. Austin, throwing it to you. What did you think of Red Eye?
I think it's a fantastic film. I do agree with your guys' thoughts on thrillers being a subset of horror. I would honestly call a lot of thrillers just diet horror.
I love that. Yes.
And this is one of the best cans of diet horror I've ever had. I think it's so much fun. I think the tension's great. I think it's fun to see Wes Craven kind of flex his cinematic muscles with aesthetics and genres tropes that he otherwise hasn't really had a chance to play with. Love Cillian Murphy and Rachel McAdams, who is also very dreamy, and Brian Cox, who is also very dreamy. And just it's a great cast, it's a great premise. I do think I agree with you, movies like this wouldn't be in theaters today. I think it feels kind of small. I don't like to say TV movie, but I see what you're saying with it. It's something that I think would go straight to Hulu now, but I think it's fantastic. I think I'd give it 3 bones from Austin.
Yes.
I hope that Killian Murphy is listening to this episode right now because I think we've made a very good case, and that if he listens to us, then he will retract his comments about it not being a good movie. He said it's a good B movie, and I agree with that. But like B movies are movies, Mr. Murphy. It's a good B movie. It's a good movie. That's how that works. And I fucking love this movie. Like, as we're talking about it, it's obviously it is very much relevant and is very much a product of its time. I agree that it wouldn't be in theaters today, but that's more just because like this level of budget of movie has died. I don't think the movie actually feels like a TV movie to me. There's too much money in it. I mean, that's why it might feel like a TV movie or a straight to streaming movie, is because that's where this budget lives now, and that's
Yeah.
silly. It doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need to live there. This movie's awesome. I love the characters. I love it just hones in on the suspense. There are no distractions. There are kind of side plots, but all the side plots are brief and relevant. Every minute of this movie is used so economically, and it just works. It just works. So I will also give it 3 bones.
Oh my god, 3 bones across the board. Suck that, Cillian Murphy.
We are so in agreement. We're all in sync.
Red Eye is officially cubed. 3-3.
Oh, let's go. Let's roll. Okay, well, that is where we are going to end things this week. As I said, next time we are going to be bringing you part 2 of our exploration into post 9/11 anxieties in American horror cinema with Cloverfield. And as a reminder, in that episode, we are also going to be doing our comparisons. So you can go ahead and listen to that next time, where we are going to compare Cloverfield and Red Eye and their common themes. And Austin is going to be back for that one. So looking forward to that. So before we sign out, Austin, can you let the people know where to find you?
You go to your local enchanted bridge, and underneath you should find. No, I am on all the socials. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Would You Die Show. You can listen to my podcast. Both Devin and David have been on it, and they will be on it again, I'm sure, in the future at some point, as well as friends of both of our shows, Allison from the Who's There podcast, and Chloe, who needs a podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chloe.
Chloe.
Where's your podcast, Chloe?
But yeah, you can find my podcast there. Also, I have an Instagram at Austin M Torres. That's where I kind of do a lot of my film posting, but I post my film stuff to both. So
And all these links will be in the description, as well as
Our socials. Thank you, David, for that throw. To me, you can find Cadaver Dogs on Twitter and Instagram at Cadaver Dogs Pod and TikTok at Cadaver Dogs Podcast. And as always, if you want to see us cover a film or have a guest on, you have recommendations, hit us up at cadaverdogspodcast at gmail.com. We will respond to you. All right. I'll see you guys next time. We'll see you guys next time here on Cadaver Dogs.
peace. A comment card?